Hello, everyone, and welcome to the People Strategy Forum. My name is Sam Reeve, and I'm here to guide you through the discussion today. And then we're going to be talking about how AI won't save your culture. The leader who wins this next race is going to be the one that's not most considered about the most tools, but how to have that future ready mindset. And so today we're going to explore the mindset of it's not just tools that drive performance in the AI era. It's how we have that appropriate mindset. And our guest today is Allister Frost, a future ready mindset author and keynote speaker and creator of the Ready Already growth cycle and former Microsoft leader known for pioneering digital transformation with a human edge. He's helped leaders with worldwide transformation, really fight that change fatigue and put it into a forward momentum that unlocks strategy that uniquely drives human strength. And with the message that technology is not going to replace humans, it's really going to be our mindset that needs to change and to know how to harness these new tools. So before Allister's speaking career, he was the head of digital marketing strategy at Microsoft, leading global launches for flagship products and earning rewards for along the way. So we're very fortunate to have him here today. So if you're thinking about how your people work with AI and the best way to do that, from culture to capability, and governance to ROI, this conversation will give you a practical and an optimistic playbook. So I'm very fortunate to have Allister Frost. Welcome, Allister.
Thanks, Sam. That's a great intro. I'm really looking forward to talking about AI, yes, of course, but also how some people who could become, I suppose, obsolete in the workforce unless they approach the future in the right way.
That's right, and that's right. And I think that, as I've come to believe, it's all about mindset and preparation. And so I would love to hear a little bit about your journey and why you've come into this part. I mean, you've had a very successful career at Microsoft. What really drove you to be a speaker and a leadership guide?
Well, yeah, it's true. It's about 14 years now I've been on my own, running my own business, working with amazing companies around the world. Most of the time I spend speaking to conferences, company conferences, industry events, helping people to discover a future ready mindset. But that really came from the 20 years prior to that when I was in the corporate world. And I had two long stints with big American organizations, firstly Kimberly Clark
Mm.
and then Microsoft. And I was always a marketing guy, but it was kind of the contrast between those two parts of my career that were really insightful. Manufacturing business at Kimberly Clark, making paper products and so on, brilliant organization, but relatively traditional and stable in the way that it operates. Things like bathroom tissue and facial tissues, they don't change that much from year to year. The competitive set changes and so on, but fundamentally you're making the same product at the lowest possible price you can and obviously charging the highest possible price. That was sort of a world where the philosophy was very much, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it was only when I went to Microsoft that I first encountered the concept that Bill Gates was pushing at the time, which was today, if something works, it's obsolete. And that really was a real wake up call for me because it made me realize that in the world of technology, in the world that we are now living in, all of us, things move so quickly, progress is so rapid that everything really, if we're honest, is obsolete.
Mm.
Even how we're having this chat, how we scheduled this call,
Yeah.
how we're broadcasting a podcast out to the world. Everything about that can be done better, faster, smarter in a new way. Someone somewhere has figured that out. We just haven't got around to discovering it ourselves. And I think that's a really helpful. It's a very disruptive way of thinking about the world that we work in, but it's a really helpful way to approach your job, to accept that everything is obsolete and therefore give yourself permission to improve stuff, to pick off things one by one and say, well, that could be better, that could be better, that could be better, and just continue. That's how you keep up. So that's kind of my journey is those two organizations from traditional to bleeding edge technology and seeing the difference between those and really wanting to help as many people as possible to keep up and thrive in these fast changing times.
Yeah, and talking about change, Alistair, I mean, you must have seen lots of change in the technology front, and you're acutely aware of that innovation. So,
Mm.
how have things changed over the past 10 years in your mindset with leadership in mind?
I think what's happened is technology has become the uniform backdrop to everything we do. You
Mm,
fundamentally, there are very, very few businesses left in the world that you can run without some form of technology. And increasingly, because we are so dependent on the technology, as it gets better and more pervasive and more powerful, we become more dependent upon it. And what we've got to is a point now where the technology is actually shaping the business landscape rather than before it was technology was being built to service the business landscape.
mm,
So now we're seeing dramatic changes. And even I say even I, but even almost anyone, even in the tech sector, has been blown away by how quickly AI, large language models, have become universally accepted, have become trusted partners for many people around the world in their daily lives, and how much of what we thought was sacrosanct, what we thought was the way that we did things in life, has all been thrown up in the air. It's all up for question now because these new tools allow us to do so many things in different ways. It's a remarkable time, I think, for any of us to have been in the world of work, and it's going to get even more crazy in the years ahead.
yes, I can believe that for sure. Now, one thing that I've been seeing is that everyone is out buying the newest and latest great AI tools, and not everybody is really changing how they're thinking. So, what is the core belief that a leader should have that it really takes them away from that tool chasing to having a mindset first in when it comes to transformation?
Mm. I think it's right. I think you're right. It is the Wild West. Let's be honest. It's crazy times
Yeah,
with AI. There's new tools being developed. I was going to say every day. It's probably every hour. Let's be honest. It's so quick. There
yeah.
are so many options, and so choosing the correct technology stack, if we want to use that language, for your business, for your world, for your life, is nigh on impossible. And I think starting with the technology itself is profoundly wrong, because what you have today, it will be replaced. It will be better tomorrow. It'll be different. There'll be new opportunities. So putting all of your eggs into this technology basket is often unwise. What is far more important is, I believe, the traditional leadership skills of creating an organization where a group of people want to go on a journey together, where they want to use the tools that are made available to them to do their job better in the service of others. And so for me, the greatest leadership skill we have right now is creating an environment where people can be more curious, more creative, and can communicate more clearly with each other. Because, really raw human skills, actually, so that we're talking about what's going on and we're thinking it through for ourselves and not just knee jerking from one tech solution to the next. And I think it's in my observation, and I don't know if your listeners would agree, a lot of people are getting very excited about the fact that, I don't know, you can get AI to write an email for you. It can create your CV. It can produce images and videos and all kinds of crazy stuff. And we see that as kind of like the perfect solution because it's like, oh, right, I actually literally didn't have to do anything. I just gave it a prompt and it gave me the answer. This is amazing. I've saved so much time. But think forwards a little bit. If that's the technology that you're using and that what that produced is good enough for you, we don't need you. You are already obsolete. You're already unnecessary. So I think we have to really get back to questioning the output of the technology, using it absolutely, but not just taking it as as the perfect solution, but looking at it and thinking, okay, why did it do that? How can I get it to do something better? How can I add some human value to the process, such that it's coming up with a unique solution that is right for me and my organization, and not just the generic results that the machine is going to pump out in response to that prompt. And it's really dangerous because I see so many people who, will say, "Oh, help me write an email to this customer or whatever." It'll come out and the answer's there. They go copy, paste, send.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you allow your job to be reduced to copy, paste, send, I have
And with
news
the
for you.
message that
Computers are
technology
really
is not
good
going
at
to
doing
replace
copy,
humans,
paste,
it's really going to
send.
be
That's right.
um,
you're doing, the value of your role is, because it's about the human skills. And that's what I talk about in Future Ready Mindset and in the Ready Already process that I recommend to others.
That's great. Yeah. So we're going to dive into that in just a moment. But the one thing that I just wanted to call out here is in a recent post, I think it was Josh Person that mentioned this, that he said that over 40% of artificial intelligence output is actually incorrect. So if people are just copy, paste, send, and not checking the work and just the little minute details that really makes it human, then likely they're doing themselves a disservice for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we know AI hallucinates. It has wild fantasies. It's a very clever. I sometimes describe it as a magic trick. It's like a close-up. You know when you get a close-up magician, they're doing a card trick or something in front of your face, and you think, "Wow, that really is clever. That card really did fly from there and into my pocket or something." And you kind of want to believe it because it's so cool, but actually, when you step back and think about it, no, of course that card didn't fly from there to there. Something happened, and you were, distracted, and it was a very clever trick. And AI is a bit like that. It's been programmed by technologists to falsely lure us into the sense of security that the tech is like us, it knows us, it thinks like us. Even the way, the answers will appear on the screen word by word, as if it's thinking, as if it's typing. It's a very clever magic trick. And whilst it is a thing to behold, it is remarkable how helpful it can be. It is very unlikely to give you the perfect answer all of the time. Very,
Mhm.
very unlikely. And so our job needs to shift as leaders and members of a team to creating an environment where we scrutinize the output of AI, and we thrive alongside it, and we're adding the value, because a large language model, if you're adding some meaningful value in the world, it shouldn't be capable of taking your job. It really should not, because you should be doing something that is human, that is biologically created through your brain, not just churned out by a large language model, which is, let's be honest, it's nothing more than pattern matching at a massive scale using vast amounts of computing power. That's the challenge we have. And I see so many organizations where they're getting rid of junior jobs, they're laying off people who maybe do repetitive simple tasks, thinking the AI can do this. It can't. It cannot do it as well as those people. It's a fudge. It's a very quick, short-term fix. But all it does is create you massive problems downstream when you realize you haven't got any people coming through the organization with those junior roles, developing the talent to become the middle managers and beyond.
Right.
It's a really wild time.
For sure. Yeah, I like to think that professionals should think of themselves such as they're like information curators. I mean, they have to go out and pick the right information, pull it together to tell a story, and so forth. And so I think that keeping a thought like that and checking your work and making sure that you're pulling the story together as you would like is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and I've always held this idea in my head that AI would make more sense to me if it stands for augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence, because that's
Yeah.
kind of weird. That's just from its computer history in the background to the whole thing. But when you think of it as augmented intelligence, it has to augment something, and it's to augment you. It's a helper. It's great, but it's not true intelligence. It's not human intelligence. It's augmenting something. And so
Right.
when we see it in that lens, then we realize, we have to bring ourselves to the party. We need to use AI and all the emerging tools that will come in the future, but we mustn't surrender to them, because the minute we do, what's the point of us? And at that point, our entire, the model of the world, planet Earth, ceases to function, because we need an economy. We need people to work. We need people to generate money and so on. If all the money goes to the big tech companies because they're now doing all of the work, I think we already know that that's not a pretty picture
Yeah,
for the rest of us.
for sure. Now your ready already growth cycle has become a practical on ramp for change. So can you
Mm.
kind of walk us through the stages and how you show a manager a way to kickstart an AI transformation in their
Mm.
organization?
Yeah, the first thing I should say is the Ready Already growth cycle is the simplest model that I could come up with. I've taken out as many steps as I could. It's a really, really simple model, basically designed to get people out of the rut of their comfort zone if I can use those words, and to start exploring new possibilities for their future. So it's not just about adopting AI, it's about, just looking at the world differently and seeing how you can make things better in the future. Because it's my common observation is that people struggle with change. As change accelerates, that becomes quite overwhelming for a lot of people, and it is a source of great anxiety and uncertainty about our long-term job prospects and so on. But it's my belief that everybody can and should try to keep up within their field of expertise, right? So within their remit, they are best placed to help their company, their employer, their own business, whatever it is, to figure out what they could improve. So it starts from that point of, okay, everything is obsolete because that's what Bill Gates taught us all those years ago. Therefore, I have permission to improve something. What should I improve? And that's where the ready growth cycle comes in. It's basically 5 really simple steps that allow us to explore our world in a new way, to spot things that are useful to us potentially, and then to have some fun with them using our human capabilities, not just AI. So I'll go through it very, very quickly for you. There are 5 steps, basically. Follow is the first one. Follow is about making a list of all the things that you need to know a little bit better in the near future. And we've probably already got that list in our head, haven't we? AI is probably one of them. Many people think, yeah, I don't really understand AI, or I don't understand how to do it. Great, write it down. And just start thinking about your job and what you do. What is it that it would be helpful to be a little bit more knowledgeable about in the near future? What do you think could be useful to you in the 6 to 12 months from now? That's the time frame. So you make that list, and then you pick the first thing the thing that talks to you most loudly, I would say, just the one thing. Don't try and do everything. That's really cool to the principles. Pick one thing. When you've got that, you go to the second step, which is react. And that's about learning all you can about that thing in as many creative ways as you can, and then choosing your reaction to it. Is it relevant for my future or not? This is a check step, because very often there are so many things that we could all spend our time thinking about. It's very easy to pick the wrong thing. Because it seems interesting. And you might think right now, I really need to get some AI that will help me to crunch data or to create pictures or whatever. And actually, when you start investigating, you think, it's not really what I thought it would be. Maybe it's not. If that's the case, you just go back to follow and pick another thing and start again. It's a check step, because if you don't, you're going to waste a lot of time on the wrong thing. And life is too short. So that's what react is. Learn all you can, then react. And then the next 3 steps are what I call my human superpowers. They're things that AI cannot do, will never do, as well as a brilliant human brain. And these are 3 skills that I think if we lean into these skills as human beings, we will be invaluable in the workplace for as long as we choose to be there. And they basically, I call them open, surprise, and tell. Open is open your mind to new possibilities. So learn to look at your world of work with almost naive curiosity, like a child almost. So you sort of look at it and sort of question the way things are, because very often our experience, what we know about the way things are, is a barrier to the way that things could be. We don't see how they could be. We see the way they are. So and I get people in with my clients, I get them to actually ask questions like a 5-year-old and just say, why? Why do we have a meeting? Why do we have chairs? Why is there a table? Whatever. Really, really childlike questions. But the minute you do that, why are there chairs? You open your mind. That's why I call it open. You open your mind to the possibility that maybe there is something other than chairs in my life. Maybe there could be, it could be bean bags, or maybe we sit on the floor. Maybe we stand on our heads. There are all sorts of other possibilities, but chairs doesn't have to be the way things are in the future. Everything's obsolete. So that's the wonderful thing about naive curiosity. So open your mind first. And what's really important is you don't jump to finding the solutions. Just open your mind and allow that space to exist. This briefly to sort of say, so actually it doesn't have to be this way. The status quo is not my future. It could be something else. Then when we go to the next step, which is surprise, my second superpower, we get to be really creative and have some fun. So that is where you would say, okay, so maybe why do we have chairs? So let's explore that. Yeah, so that's where you have your creative ideas, and you say, actually, we could sit on the table put our books on the chairs. I know that makes no sense, but we could all be in a press up position or something to make the meeting shorter. We could. There's so many ways that you could change a meeting room, if nothing else. That daft example I've come up with, but have really bold ideas, have crazy ideas, not because you just want to be crazy, but because if you concern yourself with external validation, if you only pursue ideas that are feasible and valid in the present, you'll never see a big idea that's going to open up possibilities for the future. So I really try to get people to have the courage to sort of imagine bigger things than they probably believe will ever happen. And then you have some of those ideas. And then that's when you get to your third superpower, which is tell. And I really love this one because it's where each individual, having gone through this cycle, gets together a few people from their organization, might be friends, might be colleagues, might be your neighbors, doesn't matter, a few friendly faces. And you just say what you've been doing. I was really interested in this thing. I learned this about it in the React stage. I opened my mind and I said, why? I had some ideas. And here's my thought. What if we did this? What if we tried the other? And then give those people the brief that they need to make those ideas better. Don't shoot them down and tell me why they're wrong. Try to help me make them practical and realistic and feasible. And we do that together as humans working with humans. Now, when that happens and they say, yes, and we could try this, yes, and we could try the other, that's one of the phrases that I use in my book to describe this process, then you can actually, yes, the idea will shrink a bit, it'll become a bit more practical, a bit more realistic, but it's probably going to be an idea that your competitors haven't thought of, that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, that's going to be useful to your organization and to your future. So that's the whole process. Follow, react, open, surprise, and tell. And when you do that, you get to the end, and then you move to collective implementation. You try and make it happen. And when this works best is when people aren't trying to reinvent their organization. They're just trying to make something important better. One thing, a small thing, because then it happens. It's when people get carried away and they try to reinvent the whole strategic direction of an organization. It ain't going to work. It's too complicated. Just be realistic. So that's what it's about. And those three superpowers are so powerful because you can use AI during the process to help you think. Of course you can, but it cannot do human curiosity, human creativity, or human communication. Those things are unique to us.
Well, I love the idea of this process to create new ideas and to innovate and bring it to market and so forth. But as you mentioned, sometimes if you start with the marketplace, they may not even understand or they're sitting in the status quo, so they may not realize that this is a change that they may be interested in. But sometimes, I mean, some of these ideas can go to the marketplace and kind of flop. Is that a risk that we have to take?
Yeah, but it's not always about doing external
Yeah,
things, new products or new solutions or whatever. It might be changing the way you do customer service or the way you complete a transaction, of course. Um, but yeah, but that's the nature of life. If you have
yeah,
an idea, some things work, some things don't. What we're trying to do, we're not trying to be so radical and bold that we're way outside of our comfort zone or our area of expertise. We're just trying to move what we already know forwards and make it a bit better and a bit better. The alternative, of course, if we don't do this type of process, is collective, protection of what we already have, in the sense that, well, the way it's worked okay in the past, therefore it will work okay in the future. And that slows us down. That means that we're not being progressive and we're not exploring things proactively. And of course, it means at some point a competitor will wipe you off the face of the earth because things will have moved forward so much, you'll cease to be relevant and useful to the world. So it's a process that I came up with as a response to the question that I would get a lot of times after I give a talk. People come up to me and say, "How do you know all this stuff? How do you keep up? What's the book I should read, or is there a podcast? Is there something I should do?" And my answer's always been, "No. What's right for me is not right for you." And I've tried to create a process that people can take as a very personal thing and say, "Okay, I am me. I'm driven by my own motivation, and therefore I need to figure out what's important for my future, for who I am, and that's how I will then keep up."
Yes, and so Alistair, as you mentioned, we started off the conversation. You were talking about the pace of change has just become relentless. I mean, it's
Mm.
changing all the time. And one thing that I do know about humans, and also myself, is that it's nice to go through change and become an expert. You feel good and with that new process, and you master it, and so forth. And then you go before you go to the next iteration of change. Now, it seems like the pace of change is quickening so fast that we are never going to feel that degree of expertise as we once did in the past. Is
Mm.
that a problem with our future?
It's a problem for human beings because we do love that feeling, that comfort zone, that sense of achievement and established credibility. And, I know how things work around here. But again, in my thesis, you absolutely have to accept that you're not going to live in that world. Our parents, our grandparents, and all previous generations, to some extent, had relative stability because they did get to learn a skill, get really good at it, and then they could do that job for the rest of their lives and in increasingly senior positions, earning more money, more status, more whatever they wanted. That's not the case anymore. Because what got you here is unlikely to get you to there. So we have to accept that well, as soon as we master something, that doesn't mean we've got a life and a skill for life. It means that we're now ready to learn the next thing. In my book, I write about this as the way to think about skills. I used to think that if I learned a skill, I don't know, whatever, presentation skills or something like that, I've got that skill for life. That's me, and now I'm done. I've ticked that box. But I wrote in the book that it's the best way to think of how where those skills live in your mind is in a leaky bucket. When you get a skill, it goes in a leaky bucket, and that skill is going to leak out, whether you like it or not. Whether through you sort of losing that skill, or more likely through it becoming redundant, becoming obsolete. And I learned lots of things. I've been on lots of training courses. Very few of those training courses have any relevance to my life today. Because the world moved on. And so it is with all skills that you master. You get really good at a certain thing and you're really good at selling or whatever. That's going to change. It's going to become different. So accept that this is the world we live in, and lifelong learning has to be your mission. And the leader's job and the people manager's job is to create an environment where people step up to that with excitement, with a sense of zeal and wishing, looking forward to the next opportunity to try something new.
And do you find that there's a certain grouping of skill sets that are essential in today's world that are going to help with this to be change ready?
I think it's an openness. There's for leaders, particularly. I think there are some things that don't always come very naturally to us,
Hmm.
like humility and honesty about our limitations. Let's be truthful about this. A leader's job in the past was to be the sort of the source of knowledge, to be the wisdom, to be the experienced voice in the room who sort of decides what is right and what is wrong. And I think there's a skill there that leaders need to have, which is to be comfortable being uncomfortable,
Hmm.
to accept that there is no certainty about what the future will be. I sometimes joke in my talks that I didn't get better at predicting the future as I became more senior in life. If anything, I got worse because I became more entrenched in a certain way of thinking. I became more detached from the realities of the customer experience, and I was living in my bubble of leadership, and that felt nice, but it was a terrible place to be if I wanted to have better ideas. So actually, it's really helpful for leaders to I kind of let them off the hook a little bit, I think, in my book and in my talks, because and they don't need to have all the answers. They don't. It's no one should expect them to know what the right thing to do next is. Obviously, big strategic decisions, big sort of directional stuff. Clearly, they need to have a view about that. But the executional detail of that, of how we do it, is almost impossible for them to know, just as it is everybody else. So the leader's job is not to say, I have the answers, to be a know it all, but to join their team as a learn it all, as being on a constant quest to figure out what is the next most useful thing for us to improve. And that's quite a nice thing for leaders to hear, actually, because they're worried about how can I keep up with all this stuff. Well, you don't have to any more than anybody else. You've got to do it for yourself, but you've also got to create an environment where your team members can do it. And I think those are the sorts of skills that we don't spend enough time thinking about and acknowledging. Partly
Yeah.
because there's a lot of history in being a leader, and we all think, oh well, now I've made it. I think it's much better to think I've never made it. I've got to where I am, and I have to keep proving myself again and again.
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear you say that because I think one of the one of the things that are on top of leaders' minds is that they got to where they are today because they've performed so well in the past and they feel like that they need to know it all. And
Mhm.
so as you mentioned, the world changes so fast. There's so much uncertainty that it's impossible to know it all. But it's human nature also in that environment. Leaders seem to clam up or stop communicating when they're uncertain about the future. And I think that hurts the overall team. Would you agree?
Yeah, because there's a tendency if you're unsure about something, it feels scary. It feels maybe even feels dangerous to whether it's to your organization or to your career or your status. And yeah, but the tendency then is to, well, let's just keep things the same. Let's hold off. Let's not make any big decisions. See where AI goes before we move on to it and embrace it fully. Of course, I've been through that cycle enough times to know that any idea that, oh, well, it'll be a bit easier next year, won't it? When we've got more clarity, we've got more budget. When the new CEO comes on, we'll be able to do. No, it won't. It won't be any easier next year. It'll be harder. Of course, it's always got harder, and it's only going to get worse. So you've got to decide in the here and now what is something that you could improve, that you should improve, that's within your reach, and improve that. And then once you finish that, you're going to improve something else and improve something else. And if you can get as many people in your organization as possible to go to work each day thinking, right, if I see something that I think can be done better, it's beholden upon me to speak up. Even if it's not my job, if I see something, I should say, I should try to find a way to make that thing better if I believe it can be. When everybody in an organization does that, that's a lot of little changes, little improvements that happen each day, each week, each month. And before long, you can reinvent entire organizations from the
Mhm.
inside without the leaders having to have, obviously they've got oversight over that stuff, but they're not making every micro decision. They don't need to. Just empower your people to make stuff better and guide them through that so that they want to do it and they want to communicate openly. They're not going to go rogue and go behind your back or anything. They're going to try to do something because they believe that's the right thing to do.
Yes.
That's what a future ready mindset is about.
Right. So you mentioned that change is something should be on everyone's mind, every day, every week, every month, every year. But is there as when we sometimes when we develop habits, they have a tend to erode over time. Is there something that a leader should do to ensure that they have that future ready mindset, or is a formal process that they execute on a cyclical basis?
Mm. Yeah, that is why I made a model, because
Yeah.
a model is something that helps us. And if you've got it's called the Frost model after my surname, because the 5 steps: follow, react, open, surprise, and tell, spell my name. But that's more of a happy accident than anything else. If you've got that model in mind, anytime you're stuck, you can sit down and say, right, what's on my list? What should I be paying attention to right now? And it will be different to the last time you thought about it a few months ago or whenever it was. So you just say, right, okay, get that list written down and just start the process. Start working with that one thing and take it through. That I think is the way that you reinforce that habit, to the point that I've been doing this now with some clients for so long that, like me, it almost just becomes a natural response is to, our customer service scores are down. What can we need to figure this out. You can go and read the textbooks and it will say, oh, do this, do that, do the other. Or you can just put it through the follow, react, open, surprise, and tell model and see what comes out and say, you look at your customer service, what can we do better? Write a list, pick one thing, take it through, get some people to validate the ideas. And there's something that comes out. There's always something that comes out the other end that might be worth implementing.
Mhm.
And in so doing, you've made a positive difference to your future. That's really all it is. There's one other thing that I haven't mentioned, which is in the middle of my model. So around these 5 steps around the outside, which is kind of in a circle, is something that I call a personal mission. And I think this is there because this is the fuel to make you want to keep going. So in answer to your question, you get sort of tired out, you get sort of set in your ways, get into a sort of habitual behavior. The personal mission, I describe it as, it's the heartfelt reason why you do the job you do, how you earn your success in the service of others. And it is about purpose. It is about a sense of the value that you bring to the world and those sorts of things. But I think it's really important that we individually identify what it is that is frankly miraculous about our work, that what it is that we do that makes somebody else's life a little bit better. And every job does in some way, and not necessarily your colleagues. Some very often it's your customers, but I also invite people to think of the downstream consequences of their work. If you create a product and that product's bought by a business, and then that business produces makes a service for a family, and the family then can, live happily in their house, or save some money and afford a holiday, and I don't know, all of the downstream consequences are a really powerful way of reconnecting with the importance of your work and getting it away from the nuts and bolts and the detail of the daily existence that many of us have, is to remind yourself that someone somewhere is living a better life. Someone somewhere, maybe they're taking a day off, and they're playing with the kids at the park
Mm.
because they bought my widget and not that other widget that's not so good. And when you've got that, that's why I call it a personal mission, because it's the thing that will get you out of bed on a cold day in the middle of winter or whatever. And you'll just want to go back to work and say, I'm not going to get set in my ways. I'm not going to sit in my comfort zone. I believe this thing could be better. I want to make it better because I know what the downstream consequences of my job are. And
Yes.
so I think that's really important. And it's much more powerful than the purpose. There's been so much talk about purpose, but I really want people to take it to the individual level, to who you are as a human being. What matters to you at your life stage, with your outlook on life? Who are the people that you're most proud of helping in your work?
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think one of the main duties of a leader is not only to know their personal drivers, their personal why, and of why did they get up on in that cold morning, as you mentioned,
Mm,
but to also it's important for them to remind their team of how their job, what they're doing on a daily basis, connects to and impacts the customer, impacts the people around them, impacts their family and their lifestyle.
mm.
So it's sometimes we all need that reminder for
I think
sure.
that's really true. It's a very important part of the leader's job. Is firstly, I would say to truly embrace their own personal mission, because I often find leaders who don't necessarily have that. They'll trot out the company values or the mission statement and things like that. They've become so sort of company-fied that they've stopped thinking for themselves. They're so used to speaking the company language, and they've lost sight of the actual humanity of their existence and the value that they bring. But then, secondly, to encourage their colleagues, their team members to recognize their own personal mission, but also to get out of the way of that a little bit as well. To give them the space and the time and the encouragement to think about what the downstream consequences are, but to allow their team members to be themselves, to
Mm.
to to bring their full selves to work each day. Because I think of my personal missions through life. As I look back on them, I didn't call them that at the time, but when my kids were very little and I was at Microsoft, I I really cared about helping parents, young parents like me, keep their children safe online. That was something that was hugely important to me because my son, who's the eldest, was just starting to play with computers, and I didn't want him to be unsafe. Of
Yeah.
course, as he's grown up, that's no longer a core part of who I am. I'm still a father, but I don't worry about those things, and so my personal mission moved on. And actually, that's a really valuable thing, because if somebody brings themselves to work and they're a young mother or they're near retirement, it's not an age thing. It's just whoever they are, they really care about the church or community or a charity. That's bring that stuff to work
Mm.
and try to find a way that is relevant in the daily work that you do. Don't separate the two. Be your full self at work, because the minute a leader gets that from their team, they'll jump through hoops of fire to make stuff happen because they believe in something more important than a scorecard or the chairman's KPIs or whatever nonsense they've been given to pursue.
Yes, I like that. Remembering that there's more than the metrics. It's the why around the metrics and why it's important. But Alistair, you've lived digital transformation through Microsoft and now with how you coach your leaders to move forward and be ready for the world. So, is there a personal daily practice that you do, or you coach your leaders to do on a daily basis to really keep that mindset to be future ready?
Yeah, there's one thing that I mean, everything that I do is built around my process because I want people just to be working through that again and again and again continuously. However, there is one thing that um, I found has been universally loved and universally helpful. And I've got one here actually. And you don't I give out these little things, and I'm holding out for the camera. If anyone who's listening, you won't know. This is one of the greatest skills that I'm so proud that I discovered this. I give these out at talks, and I give people a 28-day challenge, which is really simple. It's basically a durable pocket-sized notebook, right? Not some big thing that's the letter size or anything, big. It's got to fit in the back pocket of your jeans or your handbag or your coat pocket. So because the challenge is this: carry this notebook with you everywhere you go with a pen for 28 days. So never leave home without it. So so you going out the door, you do your little check, don't you? Got my keys, got my phone, got my passport and pen. Right, that's it. Off we go. My wallet, maybe on my purse, stuff like that. Why? Because it's my common observation that one of the great problems with technology today, our laptops, our tablets, our smartphones, they are all about being today ready. They're very good at getting us through today. Not as good as they could be, but they're basically, they're all about the moment, right? Every time you get your phone gets a notification, it's something to do right now, right? It's not about, oh, in 6 months' time you need to be ready for this new development. No, it's all about, no, you've got a meeting in 10 minutes. Get there now. So those devices are today ready, and they lock us in the today. And even when we've got a bit of downtime, what many of us do is we sort of pull out our phone and then sort of just scroll through an app or social media or play a game or do something like that just to fill the time. What a waste of time when you could be using that time to be future ready. And that's where my little notebook comes in. Because if you've got it with you and it's annoying you because it's in your back pocket, it's sort of uncomfortable, you would pull that little thing out and you think, right, I've got 5 minutes before the next meeting, or I'm sitting in a coffee shop waiting for my train. Oh, yeah, I'll think about the future. And literally just do that. Stare out the window and think about the future. What have you seen? What have you heard? What have you learned? What are you thinking about? What didn't go well this week that you'd like to do better next time? Just write stuff down.
Yeah.
And before long, after 28 days, you'll have several pages filled with different notes, different things, thoughts, muses, whatever, and you'll have something to share with your colleagues. And that's the start of becoming future ready, really, is carving out time and space, few minutes each day. That's all it takes to think beyond today, to think about your future. And I think we have to learn this skill. We never needed to have it in the past because we were just, it was all about being today ready. We need to be future ready now. And so you do have to have one eye constantly thinking about what's next, what's most important for me. And these little notebooks have proved so popular. There are thousands of them out there. And, whenever I see someone, it's great in a company as well because, particularly if they're this style of notebook, because you can see if people are carrying them around or not. And you can then have a conversation, say, oh, what are you thinking about? What have you written down? What do you think the future's going to be like? That's the start of an organization shifting from getting through each quarter by quarter or week by week and actually making the changes today that will make their future slightly better.
Yeah, that's great. And so, for our listeners out there that are wanting to learn more about you, Alistair, and perhaps get their hands on some of your notebooks, what are you planning on in the future? What is the big thing? Is there some events coming up or things that people can get excited about?
Well, I typically get booked to speak at company conferences and industry events. So, and they'd be anywhere in the world. So, in all truth, it's unlikely that I'm going to be coming to a town near you. However, if you've got a company event coming up, then get in touch because we can always talk about whether I could come in and give a talk to your team, some workshops, whatever. The other thing that people can do, they can get hold of my book, which is Ready Already by Allister Frost. That's in the online bookshops right now, so you can do that. And you can visit me online at readyalready.me. That's a great place where you can learn about this process and start to explore, what it means for you. So those are the best ways. And I always encourage people just reach out. I love hearing people's stories. I love trying to help people because I just think this is so important, arguably the most important skill for leaders and team members for the near future.
Great. Thank you, Alistair. So, for our listeners out there, today we've heard about why mindset is the real operation system that we need to put in place when we're thinking about adopting AI strategies. So we're then using that process that Alistair mentioned, and then his tools and his books. I think that are key for leaders to really to be ready for this next phase of transformation. So thank you, Alistair, for taking us through this.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure chatting with you. I love talking about this, and I wish all of your followers every success with their future.
Great. Well, to all of you out there, thank you for joining us today on the People